If you are struggling to save money in this inflationary environment, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to create a very simple 5-step process by which you should be able to increase your savings ratio no matter what your financial state is, whether you make a lot of money or you make an average income, and then what are your expenses and debt situations. We are going to look at all of that. But before that, if you are interested in getting a very simple 4-step guide for how to start taking control of your finances, then go to the link below, the tortoisefinance.com, and you'll be able to download a free ebook which shows you how to take control of your finances no matter what financial state you are in, to a great financial situation by just following those 4 steps. I'm a financial coach. I help new immigrants set up their finances and optimize their finances so that they can focus on their career, business, or relationships. So with that said, let's get into the today's topic. In today's inflationary environment in the US and elsewhere also, no matter which country you are in, we are constantly fighting against inflation. And as things become more and more costly, sometimes those are like normal household goods or like groceries, or let's say even if you are trying to buy a car, or maybe you are trying to buy your first home, inflation is going to hit you everywhere. And one of the things that we struggle in a high inflation environment is to see that how much of our paycheck goes into expenses and then how much is left over for us to save for our future goals. Now, the problem is when we are not able to save enough money, then of course we start buying things on debt also. So that is another thing that starts kind of working against us, is the debt that we had taken. Maybe you had to buy a car because you had to go to work or you needed a car for your family, and you were not able to save the amount in cash for buying that car. So what will you do? You'll take up a car loan. The same thing happens when you had to get a good education and education costs are increasing, so you would have taken an education loan. So really, if you look at your cash flow, it's like it all starts with your income, but then there are really 3 components that eats up your cash flow. The first one is your debt payments. That means whatever debt you have, including your mortgage, rent, car payments, student loan payments, credit card payments. So there is a big component that will go towards that. Then the next one is your household expenses. That means your fixed expenses, utility payments, and other things, and then your living expenses. And then finally you have if anything is left over, then that's what you save. And what happens is, as our debt payments and our expenses increase due to inflation, we have nothing left over to save. So in this video, I'm going to give you a 5-step process in which you can start looking at your finances, your current situation, the way your cash flow is going every month, and you'll be able to start getting into control. So the first step is recognizing these 3 components from what I call an idea. That means from income, you are sending payments to your debt, to your expenses, and if you are able to save, that is good. But then you need to measure what is the percentage of that income is going into each of these 3 components: the debt, expenses, and your savings. Now, once you are able to come up with this percentage, and if you are really struggling with savings, that means the last component is very less, maybe less than 10% or less than 5%. For some people, it's even 0%, people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And then you have to find out that what is your debt ratio, debt to income ratio, what is your expense to income ratio. So once you understand these ratios, it is not enough. You cannot just stop here, because what you have done is just got an awareness of how your cash flow is going. The second step in the process is to understand what are your true expenses throughout the year. Whenever I ask my clients about listing down their monthly expenses, they invariably write those expenses which are pretty regular. That means on groceries, on bill payments, on transportation, utilities, and maybe their entertainment and hobbies and other things. But what they miss out are those one-off expenses that happens every other month. That means maybe they are buying something expensive, or they went out somewhere on a vacation. Those expenses are not counted. And sometimes those are also like year-end, or let's say something that you are making in every 6 months, like taxes or insurances. those things also need to be included. So when you count your expenses, just kind of project back those one-off expenses. Yes, you cannot estimate everything, but have an estimate for that you will have some phantom expenses which are going to come over throughout the year, and just add them to that E component in your expenses, and then find out the ratio. Definitely it will bloat up the ratio or the amount of money you are spending on expenses. And the reason for doing that is that even if you have a healthy savings ratio, what happens is you are saving money, but then as soon as you make that one-time purchase, and if you had not counted it in your expenses, then you will pull it from one of your savings accounts, and thus the amount of savings that you had became meaningless because now it is spent, and it has to be counted in the expenses. So that was our second step. The third step is for our long-term goals, because I have also seen that as people, we get very hung up on our day-to-day or month-to-month finances, and one of the things that we ignore is even after decades of working, we see that we have not saved enough for long-term investments. And this is very true even in America, where we have seen that people who are reaching the retirement age suddenly finds that they have just forgotten to save for retirement. And because they were so busy living their lives, they were so busy living paycheck to paycheck, even if they saved up something, that got used up in these one-off expenses. Maybe they sent their children to college, they did not do a college planning, so whatever savings they had in their long-term savings or even in their 401k or any other retirement plan, they just had to withdraw that. I have even seen clients where to buy a home they had to withdraw their long-term retirement money. And this can become very detrimental. So make sure that you take advantage of the long-term investments and make them a priority even before you start this monthly cash flow. That means let your employer, or if you do not have an employer, then make sure that you put that money consciously in an IRA or contribute to your 401k. Nowadays, actually, employers sign you up by default, so don't sign out. And also they give you an incentive by giving a match. So if you are getting a match, definitely take that, because that is kind of free money or 100% return on your long-term investment. So prioritize your long-term investment. Otherwise, suddenly you'll see decades have passed by and you have nothing to show. You may have earned a million or two over your lifetime, but you have not kind of accumulated any savings for your old age. So that was the third step. The fourth step is really to look at your debt. So when you created those ratios in the first step, if your debt to income ratio is more than 30%, then you need to take note and start reducing it. Now, in some cases, I understand you may have a very high mortgage and you may not be able to reduce the payment, but sometimes you may work with your lender or maybe start making extra payments so that few years down the line, you should be able to amortize it or maybe refinance it so that your debt payments become less than 30% of your take-home income. And the other way to do that, if it is a variable debt payment that you should be able to pay off, maybe you have credit cards or you have a car loan that will benefit for you to basically pay it off earlier, then one way to do that is to actually take some extra payments and consider it as part of your expenses. Now, debt payments or getting out of debt has different strategies that are already talked about by other financial gurus. Like if you look up snowball strategy or avalanche strategy, I'm not going into that. Those are really the order in which you pay off your multiple debts. But really the technique that I want to describe here is, if your paying off debt becomes a priority, that means if you have more than 40% of your take-home income going into debt payments, then you should create a component in your expenses which should say that I'm going to treat this as a bill payment, and this is what this extra payment should go to reduce my overall debt. And this can actually have a snowball effect as you do this consistently over many months, or maybe you need to do it over a couple of years and so on. And when you consider it as part of your expenses, you may also have to cut down some unnecessary expenses. So this is a good exercise, because when you want to include that debt payment in your expenses, you will be forced to look at what all things you are spending money on. And maybe that unneeded subscription, that unneeded thing that you are spending every month on and that you really do not care about, or that does not give you a very long-term benefit, you should be able to cut down that expense and put that money as a fixed debt payment or an extra debt payment. So that was the fourth step. And then the final step is, if after all of these you are not able to put something in your assets column at the end, then another trick is just to apply that pay yourself first, the one we did in the third step for our long-term investments, to our savings also. That means as soon as you get paid, put away 10% of that money into a savings account. And what we are doing is we are tricking ourselves to say that, okay, now our income has reduced by 10%. That means we are going to live or do everything else on that 90% of the take-home pay. And then you make your mandatory debt payments, you make your bill payments, and for your variable expenses like your groceries and other things that you are going to spend over the next 30 days, what you do is, after subtracting these debt payments and the fixed bill payments, you take that money or take that amount and divide it by 30. When you do that, let's say you were left over with $3,000. So when you divide it by 30, you will have $100 per day. Now what you need to do is, every day you need to measure at the end of the day that you have not spent more than $100. And this should be pretty easy to do, because when you go to a grocery store or you go to, let's say, eat out somewhere, you just need to make sure that all the expenses you are making or your family is making should not add up to more than $100. Now there is a trap that you may fall into. You may say that, okay, let me do $120 today or $150 today, or I could not help it, and tomorrow I will make up by not spending that. But that can become a kind of a snowball against you. That means the next day also you'll use the same excuse, and then very soon you will overshoot that $3,000. So be careful of that, because you are intentionally doing something. You are intentionally making a provision so that you don't have to touch that 10% savings that you have set aside at the beginning of the month. So I hope you like this video. These are the really 5 steps by which you can start saving more of your money every month. And if you like this video, please click the thumbs up button below and subscribe to my channel. That way YouTube will show you more of my videos on how to save more money and how to really do that 20% thing in your personal finance that will create the 80% of the results in your financial life, and will put you in a much better financial state. So thank you again. Thank you for listening.